Who would like to start?
Start, Manish?
Well, I think it was great to hear from the First Minister, and as you were saying earlier on, that's the first time he's addressed the gathering, and I think he was talking there about his own experience in the third sector. So he obviously comes with experience from that perspective. But as you were saying earlier on, actions speak louder than words. Yeah. And I think we have seen a sector that has provided a lot of support through these various challenging times. Yep. But there are nothing but challenging times ahead. And we, warm words alone are not going to keep the lights on for a lot of our smaller organisations and the larger organisations. Because I think, we were chatting that, public giving is down. So we are, more and more the sector is relying on external funding.
Absolutely.
From government.
And I think that's the thing that we because we've done a lot of work in SCVO on promoting fair funding, campaigning for fair funding. Yeah. Scottish Government have committed to a fairer funding agenda. A lot of the focus has been on multi-year, and you notice First Minister talked about of at least 2 years as if that was a really good thing. But that's, I would say, a bare minimum. There's a lot of other things they could do that would just make things easier just by even communicating effectively. But actually, only probably about a quarter of the sector gets funding from Scottish Government, and we really need to look at local government funding, where a lot of more funding goes into our sector, but also, as you mentioned, the public giving thing and the economic crisis that we're in just now. And I think that general sense of weariness that people have, instead of volunteering, people are having to work an extra job, and so there's an issue with getting volunteers into the sector, but also with public support in terms of money. So money and time from people is down.
And I think, we've got sessions on wellbeing economy,
Absolutely.
But I think a big part of our wellbeing economy is actually making sure people have time to actually contribute to their communities. Yep. And, people are, I think, very stressed out and weary and don't have the time to volunteer, whether that's in the local scout group or, local church or mosque or wherever it might be. But, so many organisations rely on the goodwill of
Absolutely.
members.
And in terms of for charities and voluntary organisations, in terms of being trustees as well, and there's a shortage of trustees around just now. So we really need to, for many reasons, there is a shortage, so very practical reason, but also just the kind of profile that we have amongst trustees in the sector. We really need to
remind me of the stats again, Anna. What is the average trustee? Can you remember off the top of your head? But
I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically white, middle-aged, middle class, and over 50. I would hazard a guess.
And if you join the
like you, really.
The
only thing I've got is a woman.
But I think if you join the AI session there, you would that digital capacity is going to be so important as well, isn't it? In terms of where we're going. I think earlier you talked about cybercrime and other skills that are really required now on boards as well.
Absolutely. And we shouldn't assume that just because somebody's older that they're not kind of online. My 84-year-old mother is online all the time. However, there is, and also we shouldn't assume that young people necessarily have all those skills, because young people, we talked about voice notes earlier on, everyone does things in a different way. So I think it's that diversity. Everybody does do things in a different way, whether it's digital, whether it's thinking, whether it's looking at finances, whether it's looking at strategy. We need to really embrace that and enjoy it instead of trying to make everybody more like us.
I'm going to move you on. That moves us nicely actually into talking about the AI session. So from that point of view, thinking about how are we thinking about the implications of these within SCVO and within the work that you're both doing? So are we thinking about it? Are we not thinking about it? Where are we at with what we're...
So we are thinking about it within SCVO because, we've realised that we do really great work with the sector on digital and use of AI and all of that. We've got fabulous colleagues who know a lot about that, including yourself, Maddie. But actually, what are we doing as an organisation? So we're looking into that more now, and certainly making particularly our membership offer, making that more interactive where people can tailor things. And that's the easiest way to do that is digitally. I'm saying easy, but the best way to do that is digitally. So, but we also have to recognise that not everyone wants to operate that way, but more and more people do. And it's almost part of a customer care thing. So, but we have to be really careful in terms of how we use that, because I know that one of our colleagues, John Fitzgerald, has borrowed the phrase AI stands for additional intern. And I really love that, because I think that's how we need to think of it. It's not a massive expert that's going to sort everything, because sometimes, quite frankly, it makes it up. So we have to just think of it as a tool, a resource that we can use, but it's not the expert.
I quite like to use the Star Trek analogy sometimes because actually, if anyone's into sci-fi, if you watch Star Trek, the machines and the humans work side by side.
Yeah.
The machines supplement and help the humans to make better decisions. And I think that is the beauty of AI. Is actually, it's kind of neutral. It can be used for good.
Yep.
It could also be used for some really quite devious things,
Dodgy stuff.
in the wrong hands. And I think at the moment, it's everything and it's nothing.
Yes.
But our sector, I think, has got a really important role to play in making sure that, one, we're holding the feet to the fire of government and those that are legislating on this, and that we are making sure we're making ethical decisions for the future. And, I know there was a chat, I think, in the video there about frontier AI, and you think even the terminology there is like, using a very colonial mindset and things like that. So how do we actually make sure that we don't make some of the mistakes of the past and that we get some of this out of the hands of the rich and powerful?
Absolutely. And that's something that we very much want to kind of champion, is finding that route in. And this should be part of the grassroots. That is a thing about the internet, it's democratizing.
Yes,
if you've got access.
Absolutely.
So we plug now for our digital inclusion strategy that was launched last Wednesday, and it's fabulous. It really looks into what we can do as a society to be much more digitally inclusive, to make sure everyone who wants to, and even people who are a wee bit scared to, can participate in that digital world without fear. And with confidence, and with the right tools and access. But I have quite a bit of the fear factor as well, because I call myself a digital expat. I'm too old to be a digital native, but I'm kind of in there. So it's how do we kind of, I think, as you say, keep that democratization and making sure it's really hard to do that.
And I guess very quickly, just to wrap up, in terms of like where I guess both the funding side and SCVO's role and AI and digital play a part. Like during the pandemic, SCVO was critical to Scottish Government and to many agencies in terms of getting out and rolling out programmes. So I think you have that expertise now in-house, and you're obviously doing that with a digital strategy. So it's great to see that in action.
Thank you. Yeah, we're very proud of that work.
No, it was great. It was great work, and I think, the call was put out and SCVO kind of took that mantle and really ran with it. Yeah.
And I think people appreciate that kind of being we're part of a big community instead of being part of the big guys, I suppose.
And I think also a lot of organisations just don't have the capacity in-house. Like,
absolutely.
AI is a big ticket item. So is work around climate and pathways to net zero. And I think,
we're doing lots of work on that
the
as
more
well.
we can do to support member organisations and the wider sector, it's that kind of rising tide. And unfortunately, with climate change, there is a rising tide.
Indeed.
It's going to bring
and
us
we
all.
need to remember that 75% of the organisations in the sector have no staff. They're completely run by volunteers. They've got very small budgets. So they're the ones who particularly need, not solely, but they do particularly need. Another plug then for work we've done in village halls recently. Our colleague Beth has led on that. And it's village halls and community facilities are crucial, especially in rural areas, but crucial. And so we've been doing a bit of work around supporting them to look at climate change and digital and all that stuff that's current in the modern world.
No, absolutely.
We've got, interesting enough, just with the stuff that we've got there to helping any organisation of any size, we do have our SCVO AI guide, which is available. So that's there for people to have a look. And we've also got our fair funding information, and there's the Scottish Alliance information there as well. So if it's something that people really are interested and want to know more about, please go to that.